All right, so let's get going. So if I put this, okay, can everybody see what's going on? Okay, cool. Yeah, so I put together a little talk for you guys. Oh, someone is in the chat. Oh, yep. Okay, everyone can hear. Cool, awesome. So yeah, I put together a little bit of a talk about myself, which is kind of odd, but that's okay. I was like, what do I write about myself? Anyway, so a little bit about me. Academically, I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, so I went to the International School of Beaverton, and I was a full IB diploma student just because ISB was a full IB diploma school. Okay, can I move? Oh, okay, that's better. Okay, sorry, I was moving the video. Wait, is it possible to minimize the, awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I originally am from Portland, Oregon, and I went to the International School of Beaverton where we did a full IB diploma kind of program. I feel like APs are really popular in California especially, and a lot of my friends who went to Stanford came from AP programs. So essentially IB is something kind of similar, but it's an international program. So there's schools across the world who sort of do it. And we also take similarly AP exams junior and senior year, and you can get some college credit for that sort of stuff. And then now I'm an undergraduate student at Stanford. I'm currently in my junior year. I'm majoring in computer science and minoring in math. And in Stanford computer science, we have these things called tracks. Essentially, when you get to being a junior or senior, in order to finish your major, you have to track in a sort of area of specialization. And so there's a ton of different areas, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that later. But preliminarily, I'm tracking in theory, which is theoretical computer science. It's a little bit more about sort of foundations of computer science. It's a little bit mathematical. There's a lot of discussion of algorithms and sort of how to apply them. And then there's a lot of other tracks as well. AI or artificial intelligence is another track. There's computer systems for people who just really like to code big systems. There's stuff like biocomputation. So there's a wide range of things you can sort of do as your area of specialization, which again, happy to talk about that more later, and have a lot of friends who track in a variety of different things. For me, the math minor, I sort of just picked up along the way. I'm actually going to be taking my last class for the minor next quarter. And it was just sort of something that I fell into. I thought the classes initially that I was taking in math were really interesting, and I just sort of kept taking them. And now I have enough classes for the minor. So that's sort of how that came to be. And then I'm also a coterminal master's student. So I am simultaneously working towards my master's in computer science. This is sort of a special program at Stanford where you can, in 5 years, attain both your BS degree and your MS degree. And so I recently just applied to that and was accepted into the program this past quarter. So for my master's in computer science, I also have to choose an area of specialization. And for that, I'm going to be studying artificial intelligence. So that's sort of academically about me. Again, feel free if anyone wants to stop and ask questions anywhere along the way, that's totally fine also. And then I also have time for Q&A at the end. So whatever you guys want. All right, so let's see. So I thought I'd also go a little bit over my what I've done professionally, during the summers and in industry. I definitely think a lot of kids at Stanford sort of, especially in CS, have a mix of pursuits that are a little bit more industry focused and pursuits that are a little bit more academia or research focused. And so I cover both here. I would say for me, I lean a little bit more on the side of doing more projects in industry. Usually over the summers, I'm interning rather than explicitly doing research. But I do have a little bit of a slide about the research I'm doing at Stanford as well. So at least the first summer outside of out of freshman year, so the summer between my freshman and sophomore year, I interned at this company called Change Research. And they're a startup that is funded by Higher Ground Labs, which is an incubator that looks for and funds startups that work on civic technologies. And so in high school, I was like really interested in political science. I was really like politically active and really enjoyed like debate, worked on several campaigns in Portland. And so I really wanted to do something that was sort of a meld of like my interest in like political and like sort of elections and things like that. As well as in computer science. So I chose this startup. They are right outside of Palo Alto, right next to Stanford's campus. So I just lived on campus for the summer. And then I went to work every day. Like I lived in the dorms kind of, and then I went to work every day, like right out off of campus. So that was really convenient. And essentially the company builds software to improve public opinion and election insight polling. They're also a public benefit corporation, which I thought was really cool. Essentially, public benefit corporations is like a title that you can give a private company if they are formally registered to serve other interests besides profit seeking, essentially, and like the interests of their stakeholders. So any company that is like interested in like benefiting the public sector can like register for this interest and register under this title. And Change Research specifically was looking to make like polling and election insight more cost efficient and time efficient for down ballot and grassroots campaigns by using software and building technology. And I just thought that was like a really interesting part of that company. I worked on a lot of different projects during my time there, but the main one was a like geospatial kind of algorithm. The idea was we were trying to find better ways to representatively sample different areas and geographic regions where we were running polls. This was especially hard in areas that were like heavily gerrymandered, and then also some like really small geographies. Like if we were helping somebody poll for like city council, it was really difficult because a lot of the online platforms that are available for doing this kind of thing don't really target on such a granular level. So there were some like more technical components to that involved like shape fitting, essentially. And I can talk about that more if anyone's interested, but I just thought I'd give a quick overview now. And then that like piece of technology ended up actually going into a patent that the company applied for. And so there's a patent pending on the software that I worked on for that project. There was a lot of other different sort of small tasks I got to work on because it was a startup. So I worked on some like unsupervised machine learning, like clustering models for identifying like regional voting blocks. I did some data engineering, did some like data science experiments. Overall, just a really positive experience. And I feel like right out of the gate as a freshman, it gave me a lot of exposure to different areas that I would potentially be interested in. And so it was like a really exciting sort of first experience. Always happy to talk about this more. I just really had a great experience here. I had great mentors here. And I also, still keep in contact with some of the people who work there, and my main boss, who is like the CTO of the company. He and I still like grab coffee once in a while because the company is like so close to Stanford. So the next summer, which is the summer between my sophomore and junior year, I worked at Facebook for the summer. And internship doing community development for this organization called the Bus Project that actually I think they've rebranded and now they're called Next Up Oregon. So I feel like I'm very old, like literally the organization doesn't really exist anymore, but they were working on trying to get like young people registered to vote and advocating for like youth sort of like voter turnout essentially. And I was trying to do some like research into that problem in like my community in my area, and that was when I actually picked up a little bit of programming. So that was why my first programming language is R. And for anyone who's familiar, it's sort of like good for doing statistics and like data analysis. So it's actually kind of like an odd thing to pick up as your first programming language, but I think that really speaks to the fact that I picked it up very informally. Yeah, coming to Stanford, I would say the honest truth is there are a lot of people who honestly have been coding since they were like 7. So like, I'm not going to say that cohort of people does not exist. They definitely exist. And I would say that once you finally get into the CS major, you will realize a lot of the people who finally like decide to major in CS eventually at Stanford are people who did come in with some background. But I will say the first CS class I took at Stanford was CS 106A, which is the first class you take if you are interested in doing CS at Stanford and you don't have very much background. And honestly, I started there and now I'm a CS major as well. And so it's definitely doable. But I will say there are some students who come in with significant background. Almost all my other friends who are now CS majors with me probably came in with more background than I did. So just putting that out there. I have like a lot of thoughts just generally about like how you acclimate to that kind of environment. But yeah, like if anyone wants any more information on that, I'm really happy to like advocate for people who just like are coming in with less background in computer science. I definitely think it's something that you can get started with in college. How's campus life at Stanford? Honestly, I'm kind of a nerd. Like I would say everyone at Stanford is kind of a nerd, but like maybe like I'm a nerd even compared to the other Stanford nerds. But essentially, like if I'm being quite honest, I think I like leave campus and do exciting things less than a lot of the other people I know who are in my year or at Stanford in general. Like on YouTube, I watch like those videos of those YouTubers who now go to Stanford and I'm like, whoa, it's like you're living a different experience. Like I'm like, I cannot relate. I will say, like, I think you guys know this as Californians, like, I was swept away by the weather. I thought the weather was really nice. Generally, I would say Stanford kids are, like, pretty down to socialize, to be honest. Like, I feel like people at Stanford are pretty welcoming and interested in, like, doing social activities on the weekends and stuff like that. So it's honestly a pretty social campus. The one thing I do think changes the dynamic of campus life a little is that the campus is very large. So a lot of students bike around. So that makes it a little different in the sense that it's rare that you'd come out of a class and like stroll back to the dorms with a friend and like chat, which I feel like is really common at other colleges, whereas at Stanford, everyone's biking, so like everyone's in a hurry. And like you can't really talk to people while you're biking. So that's one thing I think changes the environment a little. The other thing is that Stanford doesn't really do housing in the same way that a lot of other colleges do. Like Yale and Harvard have a system where like you live in it's like sort of not one dorm, but like a complex. And you all get put into this complex as freshmen. You get like randomly placed. And there are sophomores and juniors and seniors also in that complex. And everyone who gets put in that complex lives in that complex for like 4 years. At Stanford, every year you pretty much change housing and it's kind of difficult to get assigned housing with your group of friends. So that's also a little different in that you're not necessarily living with the same people all 4 years. And I know some people are really, really like that at Stanford. Some people really don't like that. So yeah. From Angela, if you were currently a high schooler in quarantine from the coronavirus outbreak, what is something productive you would do? LOL in capital letters. Okay, I like this question. Yeah, I honestly like I don't know. I think it's from what you guys said, it seems like you're still in classes. So I'm not sure when your spring break is, but yeah, I guess like if you're still in class, like I was also home and had to do classes remotely for like 2 weeks. That was really sad, but I was like, okay, just gotta focus, don't get distracted, like do classes online. I get that's pretty hard. Now that I'm on spring break though, I've picked up a couple of side projects I'm working on, just like they're all like CSE projects. I'm like working on a project. I wanted like my friends and I wanted to like build this thing to like look at like classes at Stanford and like build a system to like help people pick classes at Stanford kind of. And so I'm sort of like looking into that. I'm just like experimenting with some data that's on the internet about some other things. But yeah, so I just like sort of whipped out some like random data and started looking at it. And I've also been reading a lot. I'm currently reading Haruki Murakami. If anyone's familiar with him, he's actually a Japanese author and all his work is translated to English, but I've been meaning to read him and didn't have time until quarantine. So I don't know, read, chill out, do some CS maybe if you're me, I don't know. All right, Esther, what are some fun non-academic things, events, places, clubs that you enjoy at Stanford? Stanford has like a coffee shop also. It's called Coho. Sometimes they have open mic and stuff like that. I am not a performer, so I like go only to be part of the audience. But I kind of like Coho. Coho's a fun place. Other places that are interesting on campus, we actually like have an art museum. It's called Cantor. And like there's a lot of fun events at Cantor sometimes. I like art museums, and so I go there sometimes. So that's something if you're on Stanford's campus and you're visiting, you should check out. Yeah. Let's see, Annie, what advice do you have for those who aren't sure if you want to major in CS or anything related to engineering? Thank you so much. Okay, so for that, I would say I think I very much started out in that boat, admitting that like if I hadn't been at Stanford, I might not even have ended up being a CS major. I think my best piece of advice is try to, if you're going to college and at your college, like whatever college it is, you should be able to find like in the CS department, whatever is supposed to be like the most introductory class in computer science. Obviously, if you have a little bit more background, like take a class that is like commiserate with that level of understanding. So like at our school, if you had some background, that would be like CS 106B. If you have less background, that would be like CS 106A at Stanford. And just like sort of get into that and see if you like it, you know, try it out a little bit. And I don't know, I guess like be ready, like open your mind to being surprised or like pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed CS 106A at Stanford. I had a really great time in that class and that really encouraged me. Other classes at Stanford I really enjoyed when I was just like trying to figure out if I wanted to major in CS was CS 103. It was like a really introductory class on like theoretical CS, and I just had a great time in that class. Same with math, to be honest. In the beginning, I really had no idea I wanted to be a math minor either. And honestly, I didn't have a great experience in the first math class I had to take. That was like a requirement at Stanford. But then like I started taking other random math classes and was like having a ball. So like you never know. Sometimes things that turn out very difficult or like things you don't want to do in the beginning, if you explore a little bit more, might turn out to be really interesting. So I would say like if you're thinking about majoring in CS, take some of the introductory classes, maybe get involved with some of the CS related clubs on campus, and maybe even like explore some personal projects on your own that you're interested in that are maybe CS related. And then also even like I don't know if you're like, if you're considering majoring in CS, I don't know if it'd be the best advice to say like, go get an internship as a software engineer and then test that out and see if you like it. But honestly, for me, some of my best experiences in CS were doing that. And I would say I wouldn't be as confident majoring in CS until like some of those experiences really informed me majoring in CS. So I would say like, if you can, like maybe try that out. From Fiona, what activities did you do in high school? So in high school, I was actually like, if you guys can sort of, I feel like you guys are sort of catching on from this, that I wasn't actually that like engineering oriented in high school. I was very like politically oriented. I did this at club called Junior State of America, JSA. I think it still exists. It exists. It's sort of like a debate and like civic activism kind of organization. So that was something I was really involved in high school. I did student council throughout high school. I really liked student council and student government. I don't do that in college anymore, but that was something I really enjoyed in high school. And then I also like over the summers in high school, I did intern for some like different political organizations and campaigns here in Portland that were like interesting to me. Like the main one being the bus project that sadly has been rebranded and doesn't exist anymore, but that was something I did. And so like I would say if you're interested in CS, don't worry too much necessarily if your activities in high school don't really align with that. Like I feel like I had plenty of time at Stanford to sort of explore CS, and the stuff I did before that, like I still find to be like really valuable now. I would say like just do things honestly, like it sounds kind of like lame, but like do things that you care about instead of just doing things like because either everyone else is doing them or because you know your parents say you have to do them. Honestly, I'm that one Asian kid who quit piano. I convinced my parents to let me quit piano in high school, so you know anything's possible. From Javi, our classes in Stanford competitive, our grades inflated so that not everyone can get an A. So I would say at Stanford, generally, there is a little bit of this perception that grades are inflated. So I don't know why exactly this is, but maybe compared to like UC Berkeley and MIT, it seems like people's grades are like on average higher at Stanford than they are at UC Berkeley and MIT. So I think there's a little bit of a claim that Stanford grades are inflated. Again, I'm not really sure because I've never been anywhere else. And overall, I would say that like, classes, competitive is like an interesting and sort of relative term in the sense that I think there are like certain majors at Stanford that are competitive that or like certain classes at Stanford in majors that are competitive, like pre-medical classes maybe. But I think honestly those classes are kind of competitive anywhere. I would say in engineering, there's a little bit more of that mindset that like we're all like in a sinking boat together anyway, so you might as well try to plug the holes together. I get the sense that Stanford engineering specifically is actually rather collaborative. I explicitly remember in one of our first classes that's considered a bit of a weed out class for computer science, our professor actually said that on the first day, where she was like, you are all in a sinking boat together, so you better start rowing together. So I would say overall, Stanford engineering is quite collaborative, at least in my experience. I will say though, it can feel competitive or like difficult if you maybe came in with a little bit less background or you feel a little bit behind. There's definitely a lot of kids who are really prepared for the rigor and the curriculum at Stanford. And so definitely like, as long as you don't fall into the pit of like sort of comparing yourself to the people around you, I think overall the academic environment, at least in Stanford CS, is positive. Do you know anything about engineering design, architectural major? What can you do in high school to prepare? From Annabelle. So engineering design, I know there is a major, or sorry, a specialization in mechanical engineering that's focused on that. It's like mechanical engineering product design is like the track. I don't know anything about the architecture major, unfortunately, but that's sort of for product design. Again, yeah, in high school to prepare, honestly, the thing is, because I was not that engineering focused in high school, for me, I think like I honestly think it's a lot easier to actually convince like a political campaign that you're a high school student who wants to get involved, that like you have some like ability to be helpful, than it might be to like convince like, I don't know, like a engineering company that like you know what to do as a high school student. So honestly, again, I would just say like do programs and get involved where you can. Maybe try side projects. But yeah, I don't have that much experience doing like maybe like actual internships in CS in high school, for example. I know they exist, but I know that's like rare, and I don't necessarily think that's expected of people. Okay, Tran. Why did you choose Stanford over the other tech schools in the East Coast like MIT, etc.? Is there a big CS plus entrepreneurship / startup community at Stanford? Does the school provide startup grants? So yeah, I guess for the first question, for me, that was a little bit less applicable in the sense that, again, I wasn't super techie. So like, I wasn't necessarily like, I'm going to apply to like Georgia Tech, Cal Tech, like MIT, like all the techs, right? Like I wasn't necessarily that techie. So for me, it was more like, okay, I'm going to apply to schools that I'm interested in with diverse kinds of programs. And then I'm going to decide sort of like what I want to do. So personally, that was less of a decision for me. Interestingly, a lot of my friends in CS, though, did have that question when they were graduating seniors, in the sense that I had a lot of friends who were choosing between Stanford and MIT and who are in CS with me now. And I think the one thing they said about that was like, they felt like Stanford students like did things other than CS, that it was like, when they came to visit, they got the sense that like Stanford was the kind of place where students are techie, interested in CS and stuff like that. But maybe that's not necessarily the only thing they do. They have sort of like an interesting story about them, and they're interested in meeting people and getting to know people who are non-techie. And they felt like that was less true at MIT. And so that was sort of what other people said. As far as MIT and what I know about it, though, like I feel like I have friends who did end up choosing MIT and who are there instead. I think, like, again, obviously the engineering school there, the CS program there, math program there is like top notch. My boss freshman year at Change Research was an MIT graduate and graduated with a master's from MIT as well. He had a really good experience there. And so I think obviously they have very strong tech programs on the East Coast as well. And then, is there a big CS plus entrepreneurship startup community, that sort of stuff? Definitely. I will say that's the place Stanford probably differs the most from other colleges. There's a really big CS and entrepreneurship community at Stanford. There are formal organizations like ACES and BASES that are Stanford student organizations that are like in that space. There's also like Stanford Consulting. There's a lot of stuff with the Graduate School of Business. It's a really big thing. There are a lot of startup grants you can get. if you want to work on that. I think there's something called like I don't know, it might be called like the Stanford Garage or something. They do some of that stuff. StartX is another Stanford affiliated program that does stuff like that. There's another one called Mayfield Fellows that's really like big on like tech and entrepreneurship. If you want to do a startup at Stanford, you will both easily be able to find other people who want to do it with you and easily be able to get funding for it, and a lot of support. That's a really big thing at Stanford. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm super involved in that community, but a lot of people I know are. I would say, again, it's a plus and a minus in some ways, in the sense that some people really like that. Some people are really involved in that. I think in my small group of friends I know 3 people right now who are running companies. But it's also like a really sort of dominant part of the culture, and it's very there. And so if that's not something you like necessarily, there are people who feel like that too. Like there are some English majors at Stanford who are just like, get this out of my face. So again, plus and a minus. Okay, and then Mahika, so did you do anything specific this summer before you went to college to prepare? Interestingly, I had this logic about myself that I was like, the one summer I will get to do nothing is the summer between high school and college, because like I don't really know what I want to do in college, and I don't really know what I'm doing. So like I could take this summer off and nothing bad would happen. So that's actually kind of what I did the summer between high school and college. I went and traveled for a while, and then I worked as like a math tutor, at a place like near my house, because I just like really wanted to like sit around and like tutor math and like help some kids, and it was like honestly really fun. So that summer I honestly took a break. Other summers between then, like in high school, I was like working, doing internships, sometimes doing summer programs, like around the country, and then in college, at least every summer I've been working. So yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions? I'm looking at the sheet, I guess. Let's see. So yeah, it looks like there are a couple more questions from the Q&A sheet that I could answer if people are down and want to hear about it. Some of the other questions were like, what's your daily routine right now? Yeah, and then, yeah, I think that's one of them. Another one was like tips for staying motivated and having strong work ethic. I think those are 2 somewhat worthwhile questions. Oh, and then some other questions down here. Okay, cool. So yeah, I guess like my daily routine in college, I honestly really like college for that reason. Classes are really flexible, and you're not going to be in class for like 6 hours. Are you in school for 6 hours? I honestly forgot what high school is like. But however many hours you're in school, you won't have like that endless pit of time where you're just like sitting in class. It's like a class is 50 minutes or maybe an hour and 20 minutes, and you like go to class, and then like you'll have a lot of free time. So for me, like I've had several quarters already where I don't have any classes on Friday, which is really nice. Kind of like a 3-day weekend, but you can't treat it like a 3-day weekend because otherwise you won't get any homework done. But like definitely classes are really flexible, and because of that I feel like I spend a lot more time studying on my own than like being forced to like sit in a classroom and like listen to a teacher, which honestly is kind of nice. The other question about like work ethic and stuff like that, definitely I think one thing that was interesting is like I always thought I had a decent work ethic in high school. I was like, I do my work, don't procrastinate, that kind of thing. But then I got to Stanford and I met all these kids, and I was like, wow, these kids are like another level. I honestly feel like coming to Stanford made my work ethic better, because I like the people around me work really, really hard, and it's actually like very inspirational. You see people doing a lot of things and trying to like make their dreams happen, and they're really like hardworking. And so I don't know, I find one thing that's helpful is honestly surrounding yourself with other people who challenge you and who have good work ethic. Really helps me at least. Let's see, what other things? From So one thing, definitely entrepreneurial spirit. Again, I swear, like 70% of the CS majors at Stanford came to Stanford because they want to create a startup. Honestly, like that is life at Stanford. So I feel like that is definitely like a big thing. Entrepreneurial spirit, innovative, like creative energy is really, really big at Stanford. And I would say like that's honestly the number one thing. I really think there's like sort of a pioneering spirit about like kids at Stanford. They're just really willing to try new things. And so that's something that people hold very near and dear. I think the other thing though is also that a lot of Stanford students, I think, care about sort of being holistic people, like people that are interesting to talk to, in the sense that I think Stanford kids are honestly really down to just like go and do random things with you and sort of like have fun and stuff like that. I get the sense that there is like a lot of Stanford kids who are really hardworking, really bright kids, but they also like are really down to, again, just like converse with people, meet people, socialize, have a good time. And so I would say that's like another thing. Tran, let's see. How long and difficult are the average Stanford CSP sets? Is there a lot of academic resources to help debug code? Tran, asking the real questions, honestly. I would say, yeah, sometimes, honestly, they can be rough. I took a class last quarter called CS229, which is the machine learning class at Stanford. And honestly, okay, the PSETs were due every 2 weeks, but honestly, I think I spent at least 40 hours a week on those PSETs, or like in total, like, or for every PSET, like something like that. There are some systems classes at Stanford that are pretty hefty as well. That's just a little rough sometimes. There's a resource called Carta at Stanford that sort of does like class reviews, and you can see how long people on average spend on certain classes. So luckily it's like full information, like you know before you're getting into it that it's a lot of hours. So that's kind of helpful for like scheduling and planning your life. But honestly, yeah, like I personally spend a lot of time on homework at Stanford, particularly CSP sets, whether that's programming or like more like problems kind of P sets. Academic resources, there are like these programs like for CS 106, which is the intro sequence in Stanford CS. There's this really cool thing called Lair. I swear it runs like every day from like 6 p.m. to like 10 p.m. every single weekday in like this main student union area of Stanford. And there's tons of TAs that are literally like paid to be there to help you every single day in intro CS classes at Stanford. There are these extra classes you can take, like they're called ACE classes for intro CS classes, where you can take an extra unit or two and you go to an extra section where they help you do extra problems, help you prep for exams, things like that. I would say as you get like deeper into Stanford CS, I would say maybe there's less resources, but you also meet more friends that you can sort of work with, PSET with, do stuff with. So that's like helpful. The other thing is for every class, there are office hours. So there's like, we call it Huang Basement. It's like this kind of grody basement area in one of the engineering buildings, and like all the office hours are held there. So you sort of just like show up there, and there's a really large tables and everyone's there, and there are TAs. So I would say for classes that are more like upper level, that is maybe an option and a resource. Also, I think though over time you get better at being a little more like like independent and able to like use resources maybe on the internet and like figure out tools you can use to debug for yourself. So that helps as you go along. Is it common for Stanford students to study abroad from hobby? Yes, it is. Except this year, due to the coronavirus, all the programs for spring got canceled, and like half of my friends were going to go abroad, and now no one is going abroad, which is really sad. Normally that doesn't happen though. Normally, like a lot of people go abroad. I actually think for international relations majors at Stanford, you have to go abroad twice. So definitely all the international relations majors go abroad. We also have some programs that are domestic, like Stanford and Washington, where you just spend a quarter in Washington, D.C. It's not exactly abroad, but a lot of people do that too. We have some cool study abroad programs. Really popular ones for engineering, at least, are Berlin in Germany, and I think like Kyoto in Japan, because those offer engineering classes. And then so those are really popular. ThereThere's one in South Africa. There's just a lot of study abroad programs, and I would say it's pretty common. Cool. Awesome. So I think that's 6 p.m. and I'm really glad that I got to hop on. I'm really glad I got to answer quite a few of your questions. And yeah, thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Lucia, for spending an hour. We definitely, I think, all learned a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
For sure. Yeah.